Hello and welcome to the Indiana Lawyer Podcast, your source for news and Hoosier law, brought to you by Taft. I'm Alexa Shrake, Indiana Lawyer Reporter, and your host this week. As always, I'm here in our Monument Circle studio with Managing Editor Daniel Carson and reporter Maura Johnson to give you the rundown on the latest legal news. Plus, I chat with MacAna Gilkerson, this year's youngest Diversity in Law honoree, about her work with the Accessibility and Equity Student Union at Indiana University Robert H. McKinney School of Law. So, let's get started. Today is Wednesday, October 2nd, 2024, and these are your headlines. To start, Maura, you have news on Hendricks County agreeing to pay thousands in a settlement.
Hendricks County has agreed to pay $300,000 and change its zoning policies to settle allegations that it violated federal laws by denying zoning approval for an Islamic seminary and accompanying housing. The agreement follows an investigation by the U.S. Department of Justice into allegations that the county twice unlawfully denied zoning approval to the company Al Hussein Incorporated. The company sought to develop a religious seminary, K-12 religious school, and residential housing in the county. The federal government sued the county, alleging violations of the Fair Housing Act and Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act. Hendricks County agreed to settle the lawsuit by paying $295,000 to Al Hussein and a civil penalty of $5,000 to the U.S. government. The county must also adopt fair housing and appropriate religious land use policies and train its officials and employees on the requirements of those laws. The settlement agreement is awaiting review by the U.S. District Court in Indianapolis. Both the company and Hendricks County did not immediately respond to our request for comment.
Thanks, Maura. We'll hear from Daniel next on a recent warning of scams.
The U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Indiana is warning residents to beware of a scam where callers are falsely accusing people of failing to appear in court and trying to extract phony fine payments from them. The court announced it had received reports of scammers posing as local law enforcement officials and calling individuals, often professionals such as attorneys and healthcare providers, to accuse them of allegedly failing to appear as an expert witness at a court hearing or trial. Recipients of such calls are told they have been found in contempt of court, and if they fail to pay a fine, will be arrested, according to the court. Doria Lynch, the court's public information officer, said the Southern District has been receiving reports about this sort of scam for years. Lynch said this new iteration is very similar to previous scams. Quote, "For as long as we've been assisting victims of the jury scam, it's always been someone claiming to be law enforcement, sometimes using signifiers such as a badge number. The things that seem to be changing about the scam is that the scammers are using the names of real officials, real judges, real law enforcement. Accusing the victim of having failed to respond to a subpoena as an expert witness is newer, but otherwise the scam runs the same as the jury scam that we've been hearing about and warning the public about for years," Lynch said in an email to Indiana Lawyer. The court is reminding Southern District residents that real courts and real law enforcement officers will never call someone and demand a payment for any reason, and recommend that if they receive such a call to hang up immediately.
Thanks, Daniel. A former Gary police officer was arrested last week on federal criminal charges after allegedly enticing a minor to produce and record sexually explicit conduct. James W. Bond, 52, was charged with sexual exploitation of a minor and receiving and possessing child pornography, according to an indictment from the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Indiana. According to the indictment, the City of Gary operates a summer youth employment program for residents between ages of 14 to 22. Bond was serving as a commander with the Gary Police Department at the time. Minor A, 17, was employed by the City of Gary as part of the summer youth employment program assigned to the Gary Police Department. Bond allegedly enticed minor A to engage in sexually explicit conduct for the purpose of producing a visual depiction. On July 8th, Bond received child pornography, the indictment alleged. He pleaded not guilty and was ordered to remain in custody until his next hearing. The Chicago Tribune reported that the federal prosecutor is alleging there were two more victims. The case is being prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Illinois upon recusal by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Indiana. Back to you, Daniel, on a Muncie sentencing.
A Delaware County judge sentenced a woman to several years in prison after she pleaded guilty to a felony neglect charge for co-sleeping with her child, which had resulted in the child's death in June 2016. Judge Douglas Mohar of the Delaware County Circuit Court No. 3 sentenced Tricia Kavanaugh, 34, to 16 years in prison. The court ordered 14 of those years to be served at the Indiana Department of Correction and 2 years suspended on supervised probation, according to the Delaware County Prosecutor's Office. On September 3rd, Kavanaugh pleaded guilty to neglect of a dependent resulting in serious bodily injury, level 3 felony. The charge alleged that Kavanaugh took drugs and then subjected her 4-month-old baby to unsafe sleep practices, including having the baby sleep in the same bed as the mother. According to court records, on June 9, 2016, Muncie police officers were dispatched to Kavanaugh's home and found her 4-month-old baby unconscious. The baby was later pronounced dead at the hospital. A probable cause affidavit stated that Kavanaugh took an Indiana Department of Child Services saliva drug screen and tested positive for several drugs, including hydrocodone and oxycodone. She also tested positive in a blood draw for hydrocodone and nordiazepam. Kavanaugh had been investigated by DCS on multiple occasions for incidents involving her and her 4 children, according to the affidavit. She also tested positive several times for illegal or illicit substances.
Thanks, Daniel. Maura, what can you tell us about a recent Department of Justice partnership with the city of Indianapolis?
The U.S. Department of Justice chose Indianapolis as one of 78 communities to join a nationwide initiative to reduce domestic gun violence under the Violence Against Women Act. Through the initiative, the DOJ will work with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives Field Division to design and execute a plan to reduce intimate partner gun violence under Section 1103 of the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act of 2022, according to a news release. Jurisdictions will work to prioritize the prosecution of domestic violence offenders who violate federal firearms laws, like unlawful possession of firearms and possession of prohibited weapons, including Glock switches. The city of Indianapolis was selected due to its close coordination with community stakeholders and based on data that reflected a greater need for resources related to domestic gun violence. The DOJ expects more jurisdictions to join the efforts. The Office of the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Indiana currently partners with the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department and the ATF on the Law Enforcement Action to Halt Domestic Violence Initiative, which focuses law enforcement resources on domestic violence offenders who illegally possess firearms. IMPD Chief Chris Bailey said the department is steadfast in its commitment to keep each member of the community safe and free from relationship violence. Earlier this month, the DOJ commemorated the 30th anniversary of the Violence Against Women Act. The act was the first comprehensive federal law for addressing domestic violence, stalking, and sexual assault. On September 12th, the department announced more than $690 million in grant funding to commemorate the anniversary.
Thanks, Maura. A complaint filed with the Indiana Department of Insurance alleges gross violations of care at an Indianapolis behavioral health facility. According to the complaint, in March, Paige Dufour voluntarily went to Options Behavioral Health and agreed to treatment for a minimum of 1 day and a maximum of 3 days. She alleges she was ultimately detained against her will for 6 days, during which she claimed she was never evaluated by an Options psychiatrist. She said she persisted and filled out an AMA discharge form to leave. Staff openly warned Dufour that any effort to leave before Options discharged her would result in retaliation, the complaint alleges. A spokesman for Acadia Healthcare, the parent company of Options, said privacy laws prevent it from commenting on specific patient care. Quote, "Our commitment to the highest standards of care and integrity remains steadfast," the company said in a statement. Since her release, Dufour alleges she has suffered psychological harm, including severe anxiety at the thought of seeking future mental health care or entering a medical facility of any kind. Dufour and her husband are seeking up to 3 times the actual damages, cost of action, reasonable attorney fees, and punitive damages. A big Indianapolis law firm has expanded to Colorado. Daniel, what can you tell us about the merger?
Taft, Stettinius, and Hollister LLP, the second largest law firm operating in Indianapolis, is heading out west through the law firm's newest merger with Sherman and Howard LLC in Denver. The firm announced that it will merge with Denver's oldest and third largest law firm effective January 1st, 2025. All 8 of Sherman and Howard's offices will join Taft's 9 primary markets, which include the firm's Indianapolis site. The merger will add 125 attorneys to Taft's list of attorneys that span from Denver to Washington, D.C., taking its number to more than 1,000 attorneys in the firm. Taft has completed 6 mergers in the past 16 years, including those in Detroit, Minneapolis, Chicago, Columbus, Cleveland, and Indianapolis. With the addition of Sherman and Howard, Taft's projected 2024 combined revenues are $810 million, and its projected 2025 revenues are $875 million, according to the firm. Now, back to Alexa with news on a new Indiana Court of Appeals judge.
Porter Circuit Judge Mary DeBoer was named to the Indiana Court of Appeals, filling a vacancy created by the retirement of appellate judge Patricia Riley. Governor Eric Holcomb, who's nearing the end of his second term, picked DeBoer as his 7th appointment to the 15-member Indiana Court of Appeals. DeBoer, 57, was appointed in 2019 to the Porter Circuit Court bench, where she handled a mix of civil and criminal cases ranging from malpractice to murder. She also presided over the bench's Juvenile and Family Drug Court, the Truancy Court, and the Mental Health Court. Before being appointed Circuit Court Judge, DeBoer was a magistrate judge in the Porter Superior Court for 8 years. Prior to that, she worked as a deputy prosecutor in Porter and Stark counties. The Indiana Court of Appeals will set a date for DeBoer's swearing in and robing ceremony. And finally, to wrap up this week's headlines, Maura, tell us what you were working on for our next print issue.
Nearly 2 years after his arrest, Richard Allen, the man accused of murdering 2 teenage girls in Delphi in 2017, is scheduled to stand trial in Carroll County. With less than 2 weeks until the trial is expected to begin, I'll take a look at how the town of Delphi and the court system are preparing for the trial, and what the public and media can expect from the proceedings, which are scheduled to start on October 14th. You can read the full story in our October 9th issue.
Okay, that'll do for this week's headlines. As always, if you want more legal news, check us out at theindianalawyer.com. Stick around after our sponsor break to hear my interview with MacAna Gilkerson.
Taft, today's modern law firm. At Taft, we cultivate a highly respectful, transparent workplace that fosters creativity, teamwork, inclusion, and diversity. We couple our culture with a client-first approach, rewarding lawyers who understand their clients' goals and work to deliver success. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
I have with me today MacAna Gilkerson, legal intern with the Freeman Law Office, LLC in Indianapolis. MacAna graduated from Indiana University Robert H. McKinney School of Law this May. While in law school, she was the president of the Accessibility and Equity Student Union. MacAna is also our youngest honoree for this year's Diversity in Law Awards. So to start, MacAna, how did you get involved with the Accessibility and Equity Student Union?
So I actually was one of the founding members of the organization. And, for years, I had kind of thought, wow, it would be great if we had a sort of student union like different kind of groups have based on characteristics and things and such. And then I did an internship in Massachusetts. And one of my coworkers there was talking about their disabled student union in Amherst College. And they were talking about just the great activities they did together, the kind of progress that had been made as far as housing and parking accessibility and things like that, and the great sort of conversation they had had with their administration. And I just came back my 3L year, better late than ever, right? And was like, what if we did something like that? So I talked to our amazing head of accommodations at the law school, Mary Morris. And she was like, I would love to be an advisor. And I actually know a couple of other students who might be interested in doing this with you. So before I knew it, I had an amazing executive board behind me. We had a really good membership for a first year club. We did some really fun activities with very limited budget, but it was a really great experience, and I'm glad the organization has been able to continue since I graduated.
Why do you think it's important to have a group like that in college and in law school?
So, like I mentioned, I had kind of been thinking about something like that because I just personally know that whether it's intentional or accidental, a lot of times the needs of students with disabilities falls through the cracks. Whether it be not enough parking, not enough accessible parking, not having a mobility friendly, accessible route to your class, not being given enough times on tests, things that seem small and simple, but can make a major impact on someone's educational career. So by having these kinds of groups, you have people behind you who are willing to provide that support and be like, hey, we understand you don't feel comfortable reaching out to the chancellor. You don't feel comfortable reaching out to the professor. We do, and we'll support you 100% as you're facing this thing. We tend to know policies a little bit better because we've sat down and kind of, like I said, Mary Morris, who was literally in charge of all the accommodation stuff, was our advisor. So she was an incredible resource to have as far as, how does this person go about getting this accommodation? And besides that, it's just really nice to have a sense of community among people who also have disabilities. A lot of people think that we're exactly the same, which is, disability is one of the most variant of, uh, minorities, really. So, but at the same time, we do have, after I've just said that, we do have a lot of overlapping experiences that it's just nice to be able to sit down with someone and be like, oh my gosh, you see me, you understand, you understand what we're going through. So we're here to help each other, we're here to support each other, and just to have like an organization where we can have an umbrella over us is really great, just to have that sense of community.
What do you kind of hope your legacy is on the student group?
So I would probably say my hope for the organization is more just that it continues more than anything I did particularly affects it. And it has. The current president has already done several collaborative events with IU McKinney, other student organizations. I guess I would hope that people remembered that I was willing to be accepting and I was willing to help any way I could, not only, even though I was dealing with my own accommodations and things like that, I wanted to make sure everyone got the fair treatment they deserve, really. We think of accommodations as like a bonus or here's a gift to you, but it's really not. It's just to put people with disabilities on an equal playing field with everyone else. So yeah, my real hope is just that the organization continues to do the great work that my group and I were able to do our first year, and I see this current group this year doing. So I just hope they continue to help people and continue to provide that sense of community.
So how would you, explain what diversity is? What does it mean to you?
So diversity to me, I feel like a lot of times we think of diversity as, oh, you're helping the little guy, oh, you're helping this discriminated class, things like that. But I really see diversity as a benefit to society as a whole. I mean, think about it. When we let more people come to the table, if you will, we're getting more brain power to think about the world's issues. We have different perspectives, we have different experiences. We, theoretically have more manpower, if you will. And when you put all of those great factors together. It's like, how can we not improve ourselves as a society overall? So I really think of diversity as, you know, yes, we talk specifically about the protected classes, but when it's put in practice and when we actually use it, it's wonderful for everyone as a whole.
So now that you're graduated, I'm sure you're busy with a lot of things, but what are ways? Yeah.
Work.
Um, what are ways that you're looking to educate other attorneys on diversity and, people with disabilities?
As I was thinking about this, I really don't have any specific plans coming up. I will gladly take anything that's kind of brought to me or that I'm led to. But really, most of the time, the way to be a great advocate for people with disabilities is just to be a person with a disability, because there are so many common things that have, ableist undertones that we don't even think about. For example, if you don't mind me going off for just a couple seconds, Halloween is coming up. And don't get me wrong, I love Halloween. I think it's so much fun. Love candy. I can't complain about that. But there are two major things that make Halloween kind of difficult for people with disabilities. The first is when people don't bear in mind that kids and trick or treaters of all kinds of abilities are going to be coming to their door. So, like, if you have steps leading up to your door or some other kind of mobility obstacle, maybe consider sitting out in front of it, putting a bowl of candy out at least in front of it so those kids can still get a treat even if they can't come knock on your door. Kids with food allergies, just when you run to the store, just grab a handful of Halloween themed toys so that those kids can still get something fun from you. Children with developmental disabilities, just be prepared to give them a few extra minutes. You're at your house, you're going anywhere that night, you can show a little grace with no issue really. And there are all kinds of great tips online if anyone wants to look how they can be more accessible to if they have trick-or-treaters come to their house or door. And then the other thing is costumes, unfortunately. It's something we think about as fun, part of Halloween, but when people dress up as like a quote unquote psycho asylum patient, when people put makeup to make it look like they have scars and burn marks all over their body, when people do a costume that looks like they have a severed limb that's supposed to be scary. All these things I've just stated are based off of real disabilities, real features people live with every day of their lives. Yes, they're exaggerated, but I mean, I can speak personally. It's not fun to see something you live with and you consider part of you portrayed as scary and unsettling. So, if I could just, encourage people, do my advocating, if you will, to be considerate of all kinds of kids with all kinds of abilities that are going to be coming to their door this year, and to just be mindful in choosing their costume. Make sure you're not essentially making fun of something that somebody lives with 24/7.
Yeah, I think that some of that stuff I don't think I have ever even thought of. So,
And it's completely common, and I don't hold it against people at all. I just, because it's very much, that's another thing about a disabled student union community. There are all kinds of things. I primarily have physical disabilities and apparent disabilities. So I got to learn all the kind of issues people with non-apparent disabilities go through, some deeper ideas about how we can be more accommodating to people with developmental disabilities. So these disabled student unions are not just to like educate the abled community. It's for all of us because we all have ways we can grow.
all right. So that'll do for this week's interview. MacAna, thank you so much for joining me today. And to our listeners, head over to the indianalawyer.com to hear our past interviews. You can also find us on your favorite podcast apps. We'll talk to you soon.